The laughter echoed across the dunes, cruel and metallic, like ricochets in the desert heat. Sergeant Hale knelt in the sand, his gloved hands gripping the old rifle that had just been thrown at his feet. The alien who'd tossed it, an officer with a chitinous face and shimmering armor, snorted in disgust. "This is your weapon, human? A relic?" The others laughed harder, their voices carrying across the training field. Hale said nothing. The barrel was hot from where the alien had fired it into the sand, as if to prove how worthless it was. He brushed the grit away and checked the chamber out of habit. The weapon was fine. The man was not. The desert of Ureth burned gold beneath 3 suns. Around Hale, a dozen coalition soldiers shimmered in their sleek exosuits, blue armor, powered optics, rifles that fired light instead of lead. He was the only one wearing canvas and ceramic plates. The only one carrying a firearm that used bullets. The only human. They told him it was an honor to serve in the Coalition's Joint Task Force, a symbol of Earth's inclusion after decades of obscurity. But from the moment he arrived, Hale had been a curiosity, then a joke. The others spoke of humans as backward creatures, resourceful, yes, but primitive. A soldier of the past in a galaxy of energy and plasma. He'd endured the smirks and the snide remarks with quiet professionalism. That quiet had now been mistaken for weakness. The alien officer, Commander Reller, stepped forward. His compound eyes gleamed like obsidian. "You will demonstrate, Sergeant. Show us how your projectile weapon performs." His tone carried mock ceremony, and the squad laughed again. Hale rose, the rifle resting against his shoulder. The desert air shimmered as heat waves rolled across the firing range. The targets, metal drones hovering at 100 meters, glowed faintly with shield energy. Hale steadied his breath, sighted through the cracked optic, and fired. The shot went wide, ricocheting off a dune. More laughter. "Perhaps gravity is too complicated for your kind," one of the soldiers jeered. Hale let the rifle fall to his chest and stepped back. "Optics misaligned," he muttered. Reller tilted his head. "Excuses are inefficient. Technology surpasses biology, human. You rely on instinct, but instinct dies under progress." The word stung, but Hale had no reply. He knew better than to argue with those who'd never faced chaos without a power cell. He'd fought in jungles and cities where the sky burned and the comms went dead. He'd seen energy rifles overheat and melt in his comrades' hands. The old rifle had never failed him, not once. But these aliens would never understand that kind of loyalty between man and machine. The exercise ended with more mockery. Hale was dismissed to the perimeter post, an observation role far from the others. He trudged across the dunes as their laughter faded behind him. The sun sank lower, painting the sand in blood and amber. His boots sank deep, each step pulling him further from their world of precision and arrogance. At his outpost, he dropped to one knee and unzipped the long, heavy case he'd brought from Earth. Inside lay the weapon that had earned him his scars, the M250, matte black, its receiver worn smooth by years of use. It was heavier, older, louder than anything the Coalition considered modern. Hale ran a thumb along the barrel, feeling the faint grooves of engraved initials. HH for the friend who'd built it with him long ago. He looked toward the horizon, where faint dust plumes curled in the distance, too organized to be mere wind. The scanners in his helmet chirped once, then fell silent. Static filled his earpiece. The aliens back at camp would dismiss the interference as atmospheric noise. Hale's grip tightened on the M250. For the first time that day, he smiled. "Let's see who's obsolete," he murmured as the desert wind began to howl. The first ripple of trouble reached Hale as a shiver in the sand, a subtle tremor that didn't match the rhythm of the wind. He pressed his palm to the ground, feeling the faint, deliberate thuds beneath the surface. Someone, or something, was moving with purpose. He raised his head toward the Coalition camp, where alien soldiers lounged in the shade of their drop shuttles, their armor gleaming smugly under the suns. None of them sensed it. None of their scanners beeped or flickered. Hale exhaled slowly. Their technology was blind to the approach. He lifted his binoculars and peered across the shimmering horizon. The dust plumes he'd noticed earlier had thickened, their movement too smooth, too synchronized to be natural weather. Raiders. He didn't know which faction yet, but they traveled beneath the dunes using vibration dampeners, an old trick on desert worlds. Simple, reliable, brutally effective. Something the Coalition's sleek algorithms had filtered out as geological noise. Hale thumbed the comm. Reller, this is Perimeter Post 1. I've got movement, ground-based, multiple signatures. Static rasped back at him. The interference he'd sensed earlier had only worsened. Whether accidental or deliberate, it meant no help was coming until the enemy was already on top of them. He rose to one knee, M250 resting across his thigh. The weapon felt alive, as if it were listening with him. A tremor surged beneath his boots. Larger, closer. Hale braced. A section of sand a dozen meters away erupted upward as sleek armored figures burst into the open, cloaked in dust and wearing visors carved from a metal he didn't recognize. The raiders moved with terrifying economy. Silent, swift, coordinated. They'd timed their emergence for maximum shock. Within moments, more eruptions dotted the landscape, forming a tightening ring around the Coalition camp. Hale didn't shout. He didn't panic. He swung the M250 onto its bipod and took aim at the closest raider advancing toward the camp's outer transport. His target sprinted with uncanny speed, confident that their stealth fields made them invisible to alien optics. But they weren't invisible to Hale. His eyes tracked movement, not signatures. He squeezed the trigger. The rifle thundered. The round punched through armor and dropped the raider instantly. A distant alarm finally wailed from the camp. Shouts burst across the dunes, a cacophony of confusion. Coalition soldiers scrambled for their weapons, firing streams of radiant energy that sizzled against the swirling sandstorm the raiders had unleashed. Their shots dispersed uselessly, unable to maintain coherence in the airborne grit. Hale had expected that. He shifted fire, targeting raiders who attempted to flank the camp's western ridge. Each burst from the M250 carved through the storm like it didn't exist. As he fired, Hale spotted movement near the central command tent, Vecron dragging a wounded recruit toward cover. The young alien's earlier arrogance had drained from his face, replaced by raw fear. His energy rifle sputtered, overheated from its futile attempts against the storm. Hale swiveled the M250, blasting apart a raider who had lined up a shot on Vecron's exposed back. The alien looked up, shock widening his crystalline eyes. Hale gave a curt nod and returned to scanning the battlefield. More raiders surged forward, adjusting their formation when they realized someone on the perimeter was picking them off. Hale welcomed their attention. He fired in controlled bursts, brass casings spilling like golden rain around his knees. The M250 rattled steadily, its rhythm a heartbeat of defiance. Inside the camp, panic dissolved into coordinated movement as the Coalition troops recognized Hale's suppressive fire. They huddled behind transport hulls, recalibrating their tactics. Reller shouted commands, his once mocking voice now sharpened by urgency. Hale's reliability, once a source of derision, had become their anchor. A final wave of raiders attempted to breach the camp's northern flank, hoping to overwhelm the distracted defenders. Hale saw the shift instantly. He rotated, breath steady, vision narrowing to a tunnel of purpose. His rounds hammered into the advancing line, tearing gaps that forced the raiders to scatter. The attack faltered. For the first time, hesitation rippled through the enemy ranks. Hale allowed himself a rare grin. They'd expected soft, sheltered soldiers armed with fragile light. They'd found him instead. Hale adjusted his position, shifting his weight to keep the M250 anchored as the battlefield transformed from chaos into something more deliberate. The raiders, once confident in their stealth and shock advantage, began to reassess their target. Their attention drifted away from the disoriented Coalition camp and toward the lone human whose weapon carved holes through their formation. Hale felt the shift like gravity, an invisible pull that warned him his window of control was shrinking. He inhaled deeply, tasted the metallic tang of kicked-up dust, and checked the feed tray. Half a belt left. Enough to buy the others a chance, not enough to win the fight alone. He spotted Reller sprinting between cover points, issuing commands with clipped urgency. The commander's previous arrogance had evaporated. Survival had a way of stripping creatures down to their essentials. He barked orders for his soldiers to reposition along the inner dunes, using the terrain to funnel the remaining raiders. They moved with renewed precision, fear fused with discipline. Hale recognized the expression on Reller's face, the determined calculation of someone finally understanding the stakes. Vecron emerged beside the commander, his earlier bravado replaced with quiet intensity. The young alien carried 2 energy rifles slung across his back, though both sputtered with warning lights. Overheated, drained, barely functional. When he spotted Hale across the dunes, he raised a hand, signaling gratitude or perhaps a plea for continued cover fire. Hale gave a brief nod before pivoting the M250 toward a cluster of raiders attempting to regroup near a collapsed dune ridge. He fired 3 short bursts. The rounds shattered the ridge, burying 2 raiders and scattering the others. Hale tracked their movement, adjusting for the shifting wind. The desert storm reduced visibility, but ballistic rounds didn't care about erratic particles or thermal distortion. He kept firing until the threat dissipated into the haze. A sudden vibration pulsed through the ground. Heavy, rhythmic, mechanical. Hale stiffened. Walkers. He'd hoped the raiders weren't equipped for escalation, but the deep, resonant thuds dispelled that hope instantly. The sand erupted a dozen yards beyond the coalition camp as a towering bipedal walker dragged itself above the dunes. Its armor shimmered beneath a protective energy field. Behind it rose a second machine, then a third, each armed with mounted cannons and shield emitters designed to neutralize energy weaponry. Coalition rifles would be useless again. Hale's breath steadied. His M250 wouldn't pierce the main armor, but joints could break. He scanned for angles, searching for a weakness. Reller shouted for his soldiers to fall back, his voice cracking under the roar of the walker's thunderous steps. The alien commander's gaze locked onto Hale, a silent plea threaded with desperation. Hale adjusted his firing position and loaded the last belt of armor-piercing rounds. The first walker opened fire, spraying plasma bolts that vaporized chunks of sand. Hale ducked behind a half-buried boulder, waited for the firing lull, then rose with practiced precision. He aimed at the closest walker's knee joint, where armor met reinforced tubing. He squeezed the trigger. The M250 roared, each shot punching into the joint with brutal efficiency. The walker hesitated, stumbled, and collapsed sideways in a deafening crash. Vecron rallied a squad to flank the fallen machine, using it as cover while Hale hammered the second walker's exposed hip assembly. Coalition soldiers coordinated their movement around his tempo, advancing only when his fire tore open gaps. Hale's awareness sharpened, every breath, every heartbeat synchronized with the weapon in his hands. The second walker groaned as its support strut snapped, sending it toppling into the dunes. The final machine hesitated, unsure whether it still possessed the advantage. Hale swung the barrel toward it, but before he fired, Reller's squad surged forward, overwhelming the remaining raiders with disciplined ferocity. Hale provided intermittent covering fire, each shot purposeful, measured. As the last raider fled into the storm, the battlefield fell silent except for the soft ping of cooling metal. Hale lowered the M250, shoulders trembling from recoil and effort. Across the dunes, Reller approached with deliberate steps, his breathing ragged but his posture proud. He stopped before Hale and bowed his head, not mockingly, not ceremonially, but with genuine respect. "Human," he said quietly, "teach us." Hale looked past him at the battered camp, the humbled soldiers, the smoldering wreckage of what had nearly been their grave. He nodded once. The fight wasn't over, but they would face the next one together. The desert quieted slowly, as if unsure it had permission to rest. Hale wiped a streak of sand from his brow and studied the carnage scattered across the dunes. Twisted walker limbs jutted from the earth like the bones of some mechanical giant. The air shimmered above smoking craters. Coalition soldiers moved among the fallen, tending to their wounded and gathering equipment with a subdued reverence. None of them looked at Hale with derision anymore. Their gazes carried something far heavier, gratitude mixed with dawning respect. Reller approached again, shoulders squared not with pride, but with humility. The commander stopped at Hale's side, mandibles tightening in a gesture Hale had come to understand meant sincerity. "Your intervention prevented our annihilation," he said, voice low. "We owe you more than a simple debt." Hale slung the M250 across his back. "You don't owe me anything," he replied, though he knew the words weren't entirely true. He hadn't saved them by accident or luck. He'd saved them because he refused to watch good soldiers die the way others once had under his command. Still, he understood Reller's discomfort. There was no easy path from arrogance to gratitude. Vecron joined them, his movements tentative. Dried dust clung to his armor, making him look far older than he was. He stood before Hale with hands clasped, the posture stiff with unease. "Sergeant Hale," he said, his voice lacking its usual sharpness, "I misjudged you. I misjudged all humans." His crystalline eyes flicked toward the M250. "And I misjudged that machine." Hale let a small smile tug at the corner of his mouth. "She saved more lives than I can count." "Then teach us," Vecron said quickly. "Teach us how you fought the walkers. The timing, the angles, your instincts saw things our scanners couldn't." Hale scanned the camp. Soldiers gathered nearby, pretending to busy themselves while clearly listening. Reller waited silently, allowing the moment to unfold without interference. Hale felt an ache in his chest, an old, familiar weight, distant yet warm. He'd trained recruits back on Earth. He'd taught them to think, to improvise, to survive. The galaxy might be larger, stranger, harsher, but the fundamentals hadn't changed. Soldiers everywhere needed something solid to rely on when the world shifted beneath their feet. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "I'll train whoever wants to learn. But you need to understand something first. Gear breaks. Tech fails. Your instincts, your judgment, those are what keep you alive." Reller nodded. "We will learn." As the suns dipped lower, casting deep amber across the desert, Hale led them to a stretch of cleared ground. He demonstrated how to read terrain without relying on sensors, how to anticipate enemy movement by studying wind patterns, shadow shifts, and silence. The coalition soldiers listened intently, asking questions with genuine curiosity rather than condescension. Hale corrected their stances, adjusted their grips, and explained how a simple mechanical weapon operated, why its reliability mattered, why its limitations shaped its strength. Hours passed unnoticed. When they paused, Vecron stood taller, more confident. Reller seemed calmer, his aggressive edge softened into something more reflective. Hale recognized these expressions intimately. They were the marks of soldiers rediscovering solid ground beneath their feet. He walked away from the makeshift training circle and climbed a dune to clear his thoughts. From its crest, he saw the horizon stretching infinitely, the last strands of sunlight painting the dunes in molten gold. The desert looked peaceful now. Temporary peace, he reminded himself. Raiders regrouped. Threats evolved. The galaxy never stopped shifting. But tonight, at least, they'd survived. The M250 hung from his shoulder like an old friend. Hale rested a hand on its scarred receiver. He thought of the soldier whose initials were carved into the metal, the battles they'd fought, the lessons etched into every groove. He felt no ghosts, only gratitude. That rifle had carried him through hell and back, and today it had shielded an entire squad that once mocked its very existence. Behind him, he heard footsteps, light, cautious. Reller spoke without coming too close. "We will rebuild the camp tomorrow. But for tonight, the men wish to honor you. You restored their faith." Hale glanced over his shoulder. "I didn't come here for honors." "I know. Rella replied. That is why you're worthy of them. Hale looked once more across the dunes. The stars began to pierce the darkening sky, brilliant against the void. A strange comfort settled over him, a sense that he had stepped into a role he hadn't realized he missed. Not a relic, not an outsider, a soldier doing what he'd always done, holding the line when others faltered. He descended the dune and walked back toward the waiting soldiers, the M250 steady by his side, ready for whatever came next.